Thanks again, Brandon, for joining me today. If you want to start us off, could you give a quick maybe intro about yourself and what you're building at Buyable?
Yeah, I'm Brandon Stokes, co-founder, CEO of Buyable. Buyable helps basically banks, credit unions, lenders issue smart auto loans to people with credit thin people, thin borrowers. We have an AI-powered platform that basically looks at your credit, your spending history, and then matches you with affordable loans and cars.
Cool. And how'd you come up with this idea?
I was taking some time off from a previous company that I started, and I own a used car dealership. So I spent some time at the dealership and was just like recognizing this problem of people coming in, especially people who are first-time car buyers, immigrants. There's a large, like almost 1 out of 3 people came into the dealership had trouble getting financing. So we either had to turn them down or, we had a lot of predatory offers, high interest rate offers. So I thought there was a need for that, and started my journey down Buyable.
Cool. That's awesome. I love it. And is the product live right now where like they could go to your website and sign up for this, or are you still building?
Yeah, so you can go to our website, get pre-approved. We're going to be live in Q4, so pretty soon.
Cool. And then I want to transition the conversation to what we're talking about today, which is Y Combinator and Techstars. So you were the founder of a company called Qwest that went through YC, I think, in winter 2019. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And then Buyable is part of the recent spring 2023 class of Techstars, right?
Yep.
Cool. So just kind of start us off, I'm kind of curious about, I guess, just like your decision to apply to a different accelerator rather than continue to try to do like YC again. I guess, like, why did you decide to go with Techstars the second time around? Were you looking for something new or something in particular that maybe Techstars had that YC didn't? Or talk to me about your decision-making process there.
Yeah, to be honest, Techstars kind of just happened. It wasn't in the plan. Like going through an accelerator again wasn't in my plan when I started Buyable.
Yeah.
I actually just met some really great people at Techstars, and through conversations with them and kind of understanding what the needs of our business was at the time, I thought that they could be very helpful. To give context, like started Buyable, I was kind of working on it full time since September of last year. I had 2 co-founders in mind that I had kind of been like bouncing ideas off of, but they weren't full time. And I think from a business standpoint, where we were weakest as a team was in the sales side. So, starting a company, we sell into banks and credit unions. And so I kind of wanted to like freshen up my skills on the sales side, especially selling to more like a enterprise, highly regulated kind of industry. And so I got the opportunity. I actually got introduced to the MD at Techstars New York. Great guy, pitched me on the value of Techstars. I told him what we were doing. He liked it. I liked his mission, his background, and a lot of the expertise he had, especially being in New York. We went to the New York program, so being very finance heavy. And then he introduced me to a lot of dope founders that went through the program that also sold into bank credit unions that had a lot of success. And they were kind of able to give me a lot of perspective and insights around the value of it. And so I think with that, plus kind of getting my 2 co-founders to come on board around that time, add a little structure to our team. They were both first-time founders. It's my 3rd company that I started, but my 2 co-founders are first-time founders. So it was good to have like something, give them a little bit of structure too, and kind of onboard them into the startup experience. So I think like a culmination of all those factors made it make sense for us.
Cool. Love that. And then now that you've been through both YC and Techstars, I was wondering if like you could talk about just like the major things that stood out in terms of like the differences and similarities between the 2 programs.
Yeah. They have a very different approach to how they build companies. I would say that, so like the theme that I kind of take away from their approach, and at least the outcome of their approach, would be that Techstars creates great founders, YC creates great companies. And what I mean by that is the experience is very, very different. YC is pretty hands-off. It allows founders to spend a lot of time with their customers and their companies. And so if you're a founder that's pretty mature, well-versed, and knows what you're doing, your company can have great growth. But if you're a novice founder, it might be a little hard for you to kind of navigate starting a company. And because YC is so hands-off, it might be hard for you to get kind of like the hands-on-ness that your company might need, and you as a founder, because as a founder, you have to always grow faster than your company grows. And because YC and the partners at YC are very important in the community, so they have a lot of other obligations outside of just like YC companies. And the batches at YC are just also really big now.
Yeah.
When I went through, it was about 100 companies. So that was like the largest. I think it's gone up to like 400 something companies in the batch, right? And so it's also hard to get kind of that one-on-one time because the batches are a lot bigger. So again, if you're like a mature founder, especially like multiple time founder, or you just really have a lot of expertise in what you're doing, you don't really need kind of, I would say, the kind of some of the hands-on things that then your company will go great because they literally just kind of just like let the leash off and they make the important connections. Techstar is a little different. And I would honestly say that for a first-time founder, that's pretty raw. And also it's kind of learning a lot about being a founder and what it means to be a founder and like some of the early stage kind of like basic level things that you need in order to be a successful founder. I feel like Techstar is really great at that. They have way more of a hands-on approach.
Yeah.
And so they're really teaching you like, it feels like a little bit like school, especially in the beginning. But they're really kind of onboarding you really quickly, kind of like the startup space and like throwing, I would say, a lot into you as a founder and not necessarily your company in the beginning, right? Mm-hmm. And so what it helps is like it just all the skills, sales, strategy, team building, all these like basic like fundamental skills that you need to have as a founder. They kind of like reaffirm that, have programs and courses on that, have people come in and talk about these things. They have decks and reviews and meetings and all types of like that. And then also their batches are much smaller. So like, there was only 12 companies in our batch. So it's definitely just a lot more hands-on and a lot easier to get kind of one-on-one time. I would say another key difference is Techstar's approach is like every city has a different batch of different cities. So the quality of the programs, I would say, vary, right? So like in New York, it's one of the, our MD there has been in the industry for a very long time, a lot of knowledge, big network, big community there. It's an older program.
Yeah.
Whereas like potentially like a newer program with a newer MD and a newer person, right? Like you might not get as quality of an experience because it's not as, so like there's a range as far as the quality of programs. Whereas YC is everybody's together. So kind of it's probably a little more consistent. With like from a brand perspective, the companies are probably more consistent. Whereas like I would say Techstars is probably like New York's going to have better batches than another city, right? Or like Colorado, Denver is like, which is like the OG ones have a different set of like outcomes compared to like a newer city that is onboarding, right? So there's that. And then I would say the last final thing I would say is I think the biggest difference, it's not the biggest difference, but another difference I would say between the two is just brand recognition. YC just has it's just a little more stronger of a brand than Techstars because of a little bit more of the consistency. When you actually look at the data, they actually have the same number of exits and have the same number of like companies and founders that exit relative to each other. Of course, but YC just has a bigger exits on average, right? So you still get that quality there, but the volume, and YC has built a good brand around that. And the other thing is like I don't really know any partners at YC that aren't really, really rich. Like they're most of the people that work at YC that are advising the batches are really successful founders themselves.
Yeah.
And so they have, I would say, like some probably more of an operating level experience than maybe like some Techstars managing directors might have. And then also too, because they're also really rich, they can also write you checks. So we had a few partners in Qwest at YC invest in our company, right? Where it might be a little more difficult for that to happen with Techstars, but the alumni network at Techstars is humongous. So like, of course the alumni make investments into Techstars companies as well. So yeah.
Cool. A lot of great points there. Wanted to dive deeper into some of the things that you said. One of the things you mentioned was just like YC is a little like less hands-on and Techstars a little more hands-on. Can you give maybe like an estimation of just like the time commitment? Like I imagine for YC, it's probably like a couple hours a week where you're like meeting with your partner, you're talking with like other people in the community. Like, how much of a difference is it with Techstars? Yeah.
Yeah. YC is pretty standard. You're like hour and a half, 2 hours a week, right? Commitment. Plus, I mean, if you consider the dinner, like you might have like direct facing with partners, with your partner, with your group partners, probably 30 minutes to an hour a week. And then you have the kind of batch dinners that we have, which is like another hour, hour and a half. So it's like the time commitment. It's typically on Tuesdays. I don't know if they changed the format, but you're there Tuesday from like 6 p.m. to like 9 p.m.
Gotcha.
Techstars is different. Techstars is during the day. It can be a little bit more difficult to kind of, I would say, like if you have a high growth company to like manage it, because it happens typically between the hours of like 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. You're doing stuff, and you're for the most part connecting 3 to 4 times a week for a couple out for like 2 hours. So I was talking about like 10 hours to 15 hours a week. It definitely scales. So in the beginning, it's very hands-on. Like the first 2 to 3 weeks, or it's probably like a 4-hour commitment per day every day. And then towards the end of the program, you're like, maybe a couple hours a week. So it definitely kind of like a ramp up and ramp down period.
Cool, makes sense. And then you also allude to the fact that like usually YC's programming might be better for like repeat founders or kind of like people who built startups before, where Techstars might be better suited for like first-time founders. What are some of the other like things that you notice when you look at your cohort in YC versus like Techstars? Maybe is it like types of companies? Maybe like I've heard, I mean, a lot of YC companies are building like B2B SaaS, whereas Techstars might be better or more appealing to like people who are building retail companies or other types of startups. Were there other trends that you, I guess, noticed when you think about like the people in your cohorts?
Yeah. So so from the YC standpoint, it's funny. I've always like YC back when I went through YC, and before that was always like consumer, right? Like they were like just like the best. They always built the big consumer companies, and they definitely focus more on B2B. I think that trend kind of just goes in association to like what's going on right now, or like what the startup ecosystem needs. So like you'll notice that like a lot of YC is AI now, because AI is the future, right? And it was like that when it came to like Web3, and it was like that when it came to social, and it was like that when it came to, all types of like, marketplaces and things like that. So for the most part, like I would say like YC's always been on the forefront of the curve as far as like whatever's kind of in motion from an ecosystem, because at the end of the day, like though San Francisco has lost some of its luster for like innovation, and like innovation has kind of moved a little bit outside of kind of the Bay Area, it's still the leading area when it comes to like innovation than other areas. So YC is going to get first dibs for the most part on like that next wave. Techstars is more diverse because YC is only in the Bay Area and Techstars is around the world. They have a different perspective. A lot of their accelerators are, since they're city based, they kind of fit the environment or mold of that city. So you'll see like a lot of financial stuff in New York. You might see a lot of like entertainment or social or commerce or even space stuff in LA, or, like different regions have kind of a different ecosystem, and they kind of tailor their programs around whatever that ecosystem is fostering. So I would say that's kind of like a big difference.
Cool. And then you mentioned the program quality might change depending on like what city, which city you're doing the Techstars program in. Like I think you mentioned New York definitely has like, they've been there a while. I think you said Colorado was one of the first ones. What are the other major cities where Techstars is that like you'd be excited to participate in? That way.
I don't know if I have enough knowledge to say that, to be honest, because I didn't look at I didn't compare a lot of the programs. I do know that though there's like some standard programming that happens at Techstars, but then I would say like there's a lot of programming that happens that's relative to the knowledge of the MD. So I would say that whenever you're evaluating a Techstars program, understand who's running the program and what their background is. And that's gonna be really useful. But I don't know if I could rank the programs, because I don't know.
Makes sense. And then you also talked about like YC partners. A lot of them are like successful founders that maybe went through YC, exited, now they're kind of like paying it forward. Can you talk a little bit about like maybe your MD's background at Techstars, so we kind of have an idea of like their background and why they're capable of supporting founders like yourself?
Yeah, no, at Techstars, KJ is great. He's been there for over a decade, one of the longest MDs.
Yeah.
The network of people that he knows is able to bring to. So like a big part of like the Techstars thing is like your MD is your MD is gonna help you be much more successful, right? So if you have a great MD, a managing director, then they'll be able to put you in and they'll be able to bring different people in the room that are harder to get to. So he was able to bring really quality advisors, really quality companies, really quality founders to talk to us. Because he's been around for so long and he was able to like make the right calls. People knew who he was. So if you wanted to like, you know, somebody to come in and talk to us at a really high level, they'll do it for him. So I would say like, yeah, when you're evaluating Techstars, I would say the biggest thing is who's the MD managing director over that program, and look into their background to make sure there's alignment.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And then I also want to touch on just like the advice you received at YC versus Techstars. I've been around a lot of YC founders, and I know like they always drill like building product, coding, and talking to customers. That's kind of like the three main things that they like focus you in on while you're going through YC. Is that advice, like even though the program is a lot more, is that advice generally the same at Techstars, or do they focus you a lot more on other things, like maybe like distribution or other aspects about your business that maybe YC doesn't?
I would say in general, how would I say? So yeah, I think like everybody knows like to make something people want and all that. I think like that is pretty standard advice across every accelerator that you're gonna go to.
Yep.
There's some beliefs that I would say a few core beliefs that that Techstars has, I would say, different than YC. Like one of the things that like we spent time on in Techstars that we never did in YC is like financial modeling, right? Like being able to model out your business, right? That's something that we would never talk about it at YC. Whereas a different kind of like belief of planning and forecasting is a little bit more of a thing. But I wouldn't necessarily say that they have different beliefs as far as what drives the business. I just think they have a little bit ways of going about it. Whereas like Techstar is going to kind of try to put you on like rails with like work and things like that, like with like almost homework and tools and stuff, so like where you don't fail. Whereas like to make sure you don't fail. Whereas like YC kind of like fail fast. So like I guess an example would be like swimming, right? Techstars will teach you how to swim, right? And they're sort of like, you know, start through the shallow end and move you into the deep water at the time. Whereas like YC is going to throw you into the deep end and say, you got to figure it out while you're going. They're going to coach you from like the deep end while you're trying to like whatever. And so like, do this, do that, you know? And so, which is, and I don't like no approach. I can't say one approach is better than the other, right? Because I think it matters depending on like how what the founder is like going to be more receptive to, and how they would like, you know, to grow and build. But which is why like some of the, you know, from an exit standpoint, the outcomes are relatively the same. Yeah, I would say that was kind of the only analogy I could think of, like a different. It's just more the approach. They're trying to both get the same goal, you swimming, right? But they just have like a different way of doing it.
Gotcha. And then now that you're basically an alum of both accelerators, how are you basically continuing to basically involve yourself with those communities? Is it mostly just like keep in touch with the founders that you met, or are there certain resources or products that like these accelerators built that you find yourself using frequently?
Yeah. So YC has a great infrastructure for founders to stay connected. We have kind of our own like social platform that stuff is there, and I almost check it like I would say like every other day. They're really good about outreach and updates and building like a community. And I would say because they run they have 2 batches every single year, and for the most part you're in like these big groups with a lot of companies. I would say it's easier for it to feel like a community than like Techstars is a little more fragmented, right? And so the communities kind of the communities and Techstars seem to be more fostered around location. But Techstars is catching up from a technology perspective because they have like a new platform that they launched, I think recently, or like this year or last year, that's able to kind of foster community. They're working on like improving that kind of founder to founder connection. I think whether you go through Techstars or YC, both communities are going to want to help each other regardless, right? So if I hit up a Techstar founder that I never met, or I had a YC founder that I never met, right, they're going to be responsive and help each other, because at the end of the day, it's about pushing the brand forward. And it's like, helping all boats, like everything float well, just adds value to where you came from, and you're, being an alum. So whether somebody from Techstars hits me up or YC, I'm going to try my best to give back. And I think that's truth for anybody that goes through.
Cool. And if like a future founder reaches out to you and asks for advice on like how to get into like a Techstars or YC, what general advice would you give to them as they're preparing?
Yeah. So I said the first thing is you need to operate your business like you don't need YC or Techstars, right? Like, I think a lot of founders think that I need to get into YC or Techstars in order for me to be successful, and that's not the case. I think that it could be a journey on your, like, part of your path, but the founders that I know that are successful would be successful whether YC or Techstars is a part of their journey or not, right? And so I wouldn't over optimize what you're doing to get into an accelerator. I would over optimize what you're doing to be successful as a company that's talking to customers, that's building things really fast, iterating quickly, that's selling, right? That's feedback loop, that's understanding, like all of the kind of, I would say, like basic kind of the cliche sort of advice. You have to be doing those things, whether they're involved or not. Do them. And I like, for the most part, me doing those things is kind of when I got the opportunity to get either interviewed at YC or interviewed at Techstars. Like, I got my foot in the door, because at the end of the day, the people who I talked to knew that I was going to take this no matter whether they gave me a check or not. Like, I'm not going to stop because they decided to pass. I have a belief, I have a vision, I have a goal, I'm working towards it, and whether they want to invest or not, I don't care.
Yeah, makes sense. And then looking back at like that admission process for like YC versus Techstars, do you think they evaluate for like different things, or generally the same things?
I think generally the same thing. I think they have a thesis.
Yeah.
I think they kind of have a core beliefs and thesis. And so they look for certain things. I think also because they've been around for a very long time, they can recognize, they have like good pattern recognition, so they can understand kind of like, they're like taking a bet on you as a founder and your idea second. So, I mean, like I would say it's way, way less common that they love your idea and not the founders. It's always the case that they love you as a founder, and whether you go with this idea or not, they don't care, because so many founders get into YC and Techstars and pivot, do something completely different, right? And so really it's just they're looking for great founders, great people, and great founders that they'll believe in and back like with their dollars. So yeah.
And it sounded like you raised some money. I mean, you mentioned the partners at YC invested in your company coming out of YC. Did you raise the money coming out of Techstars as well? And was wondering if you could talk maybe about the fundraising experience and maybe, how was it different?
Yeah, definitely different, I would say. So naturally, YC is the most recognizable brand in the world, right? So you have a lot more eyeballs on you with YC. But with that comes responsibility, because you have to be a lot more buttoned up, because you're going to have really big names looking at you. And I would say it's much more competitive because you're in such a big batch of companies that, like, only really the top 5% of companies, like at the end of the day, 95% of, 80% or whatever the number is of Techstars companies and YC companies, like, are going to have a tough time, right? Think about that 5 that have a really great time fundraising, that 15% have an okay time fundraising, that 80% are going to have a really tough go at it. I think YC has tried to optimize that model with their larger 500K investments. I hope that Techstars picks that up, because at the end of the day, you give your cohort and batch, more runway you give, the more opportunity for success, right? And so I feel like YC is going to probably have more success long term with their larger check size. To founders, now you can spend less time fundraising after the batch than with Techstars. So that's like 2 things. And but our experience fundraising, so with Qwest, when we came out of Techstars, we were cash flow positive, so we didn't need to raise. I mean, out of YC. And so therefore we didn't really put too much effort or emphasis into raising after YC. And so that was like our strategy with Qwest. With Buyable, we require a little more capital. It's a different sales process, different revenue process, right? And so, we're actually starting to kick off our fundraise now, actually coming in September. And so, yeah, we raised some money before Techstars and during Techstars, but we're gonna start kicking off our official round in the next month or so.
Cool. And you imagine going through like the Techstars network as like your main resource to get those investors, or you think both? Okay.
Right. I'm a part of both networks. So at the end of the day, when you're an alumni of their company, of either batch, they're going to support you no matter what, because at the end of the day, whether they made an investment in your company, they still made an investment as you as a founder. So it is in their best interest to like help you win. So I definitely like both networks to get our fundraise across the line.
Cool. And last question, since I know we're getting close on time. Now that you've been through both programs, I guess like which one do you recommend to founders that ask you, and or is it just like specific based on like that founder and that company?
I would say I would give really specific advice, right? That founder, that company. If you are so if you have just an out of the box idea, like, wow, this is crazy, and you're a novice founder, I would probably recommend YC, right? Because what YC is able to do there, I mean, like you have 200 companies, they're going to recognize which ideas are the best of those companies, and they're going to be able to take their resources and like put it behind, right? And so I would do that. If you are a mid-tier founder, if you're a great founder with a okay idea, I would say YC. So like YC, I would recommend like amazing idea, so-so founder. Your best chance of success is probably YC. And also if you're like an amazing founder with like a whatever idea, and honestly, there's a lot of those at YC, like just next level people, their ideas aren't that great. YC. I think like if you are a novice founder, you don't know a lot, and you have a really good idea, like Techstars is going to put you in the space to where you can grow as a founder to like take that idea to the next level, right? And so like I think I would kind of just like get a feel for the founder, what they're doing and how they're approaching it, to make a recommendation, because you can drown at YC, you can not succeed at Techstars. And even then, I don't even know if my advice would, I don't know, right? Like I can give you advice that could be wrong. So that would just be my opinion.
Cool. Well, really appreciate it, Brandon. I found this very insightful, and I